Today we're going to watch a very scary Hellish NDE of a woman who died and saw the lake of fire and experienced torment in hell. And I'm going to give you my honest thoughts and reaction to it as we go through the video. Welcome back. My name is Melissa Denise, and today we're going to dive into the topic of hellish near-death experiences, something that really freaks a lot of people out. And specifically, we're going to look at hellish near-death experiences from Christian NDE channels. I often get the question from people, why do you discriminate against Christian NDEs on your channel? I have invited Christians who have had more Christian-based NDEs onto my channel. The only ones that have responded are the people who are more open-minded. For instance, Howard Storm, Sharon Milliman, Pauline Glamochek, Karen Wilkinson. Typically, the guests that come on my channel are also open-minded towards other people's beliefs. They're open to the fact that Christ can reveal Christ's self to people of various traditions and speak to them in different ways. I have invited more hardcore Christians onto my channel in the spirit of open-mindedness, wanting to provide unbiased information, but none of them have responded. Today we're going to watch a very scary, hellish NDE of a woman who died and saw the lake of fire and experienced torment in hell. And I'm going to give you my honest thoughts and reaction to it as we go through the video. One final note before we get into it. It's very important to me to treat these people's stories with the utmost respect. I'm sure it's incredibly difficult to share these stories. Their stories are their own. Their stories belong to them, not to me, not to anyone watching this podcast. Their stories were meant for them. Their experiences were meant for them. And the interpretation of those experiences is highly personal to them. So I am not here to tell anybody what they did or didn't experience or how they should or shouldn't interpret it. It's hard enough to share without people questioning your authenticity or your interpretation of your experience. So let's watch these stories with respect, and then we can use our critical thinking to form our own opinions for ourselves without trying to impose our opinions on the experiencers. Here's the video we're going to watch. Woman dies and goes to hell. This is what she saw. From the account Isaiah Seldevar, he has over 1 million subscribers. So this video has had a lot of views, over 600,000. And I do believe that this woman is sharing a true account of something that happened to her.
It was back in March in 2017, and I was with who I thought was my friend. It was drug buddy. She was a very bad heroin addict, and I was just dabbling into it. And she gave me a shot in my arm. It was that night when I realized just how heavy I was, just how deep I was, just how dark I was, how a dark place it was.
I do want to pause for a moment to say that it is very, very common for people who either die of a drug overdose or with drugs in their system when they pass, and somebody who is in a very heavy, dark, dense energy when they pass, for that NDE to be of a hellish nature. It doesn't happen all the time. There's plenty of stories of people who are in a dark place and they leave their body and enter into a completely heavenly realm, and they're shocked to find themselves in heaven when they actually believe that they probably should have gone to hell. But many of the hellish NDE accounts that I hear are from people who have been doing drugs and or are in a really dark, dense emotional state. We're going to jump ahead to the beginning of the NDE.
And then all of a sudden, I closed my eyes, and it was like the dark, all of a sudden I closed my eyes, all of a sudden my eyes got really dark. It's just blacker than anything we've ever seen on earth.
I want to pause again to just reiterate compassion and respect. This woman went through some trauma. She was treated terribly leading up to her NDE. Nobody should have to go through this. And to qualify on my original statement, I absolutely am not saying that a hellish NDE is anybody's fault, that it is somehow their fault that they had the hellish NDE because of their state of mind. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. I'm just noticing a pattern that I often see. But should anybody have this experience? Does anybody deserve this experience? Absolutely not.
I was just falling, and I felt like a little bit of a chill, And I was falling. I felt so fearful. It was so black. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. I am feeling it more. I'm scared than I've ever felt in my life.
So many NDEers, when they first leave their body, describe entering pure dark, beyond dark, because there's no dark and light. It's just nothingness. Velvety emptiness is often how it's described. Then what seems to be the case, based on many people that I've asked this question to, is that the state of mind of the person who's in that emptiness, that velvety darkness, influences how it's experienced. The vast majority of NDEers experience it as deeply peaceful, nourishing, and liberating. But there are those who experience it as terrifying and horrific. Could it be because of the state of mind that the person is in at the time? I think it's quite possible, because I've also spoken to people who have initially been terrified in that darkness, who then heard a voice that told them to relax, or simply found it within themselves to relax and unfold and open up into that darkness. And then they began to experience the peace and the building bliss to the point where they could barely handle the bliss. Again, it's really, really important for me to clarify that I'm not blaming people who have the terrifying experiences, like it's their fault they had this experience, they deserved it somehow because of the state of mind they were in. I'm simply noticing correlations and reporting back on what other experiencers have told me.
I was like in like a pit, like a cave, and it was like this cave was just fear. That fear instantly was like no fear I've ever felt before. It was like there was no presence of God there. My whole life, I used to struggle with anxiety and panic attacks. The worst panic attack that I've ever had on earth, I would times it by 1 billion, and it's constant. It's constant. It's constant, constant. The fear is constant. The hopelessness, the feeling of, oh my gosh, you're never, ever going to get out. You are stuck.
This right here is what really scares people, and this is what often sends people back to the Christian idea of an eternal hell that you can never get out of. However, there are multiple near-death experiencers who have described both heavenly and hellish realms on the other side as eternal. More times than I can even count at this point, I have heard people say, I entered into a hellish realm or a heavenly realm, and it felt like I was there for eternity. It was as if I would never get out. But then they did. I believe this is because when we leave the body, we enter into a realm where time is different, and in some cases, even non-existent. Here on the earth, in these physical bodies, we experience beginnings and endings. We can't comprehend what it would be like to be outside of time where nothing begins or ends. We don't have language to talk about it. We have a hard time wrapping our mind around that concept. But when we leave the body, time is different in some realms, and in other realms, I believe it doesn't exist at all. Simply to be in a timeless realm will feel like you are in the eternal present now where there is no beginning and no ending. And this is why experiencers describe these states as if they are eternal, as if I'm never getting out, because there is no time there. But that doesn't mean that you can't be transferred out of that experience into another experience that could be simultaneously happening in the eternal present now. I've often heard it described as just changing where you put your attention. So of course, if somebody is wrapped up in a terrifying, horrifying, hellish experience, and that's where all of their attention is taken up, it's going to feel like that is their entire reality, If they're in a timeless realm, it will feel like there is no escape. But as soon as you expand the awareness, this is what spiritual growth and evolution is all about. It's about expanding awareness to be able to notice and experience things that you couldn't before see were there. And this is what happens every time that somebody escapes a hellish NDE. They expand their awareness so that they can see the light that was always there, waiting to help them, but that they were not aware of. A perfect example of this is Angie Benamore's NDE. She found herself in a hellish realm where she felt trapped. But once she was able to expand her awareness, she became aware that Jesus was standing right next to her in that hellish realm, and God was outside of the hellish realm waiting to help her. And as soon as she was able to expand her awareness enough to perceive the light, Jesus took her out of that realm. Another example would be Howard Storm, one of the most well-known hellish NDE experiences. He said it felt like he was there for an eternity. But when he called on Jesus, Jesus appeared and took him out of hell. So while it may seem that this language, I knew there was no getting out, I knew there was no end to this torment, may seem to support the Christian belief in hell, what it actually indicates is a misunderstanding of how metaphysics work, how the metaphysics of a timeless realm works. When there is no beginning or end, everything exists in the eternal now. And transferring between experiences in the eternal now is simply a matter of shifting and expanding where you're putting your attention. And again, this is Spiritual Evolution 101. Spiritual evolution is all about expanding awareness, expanding consciousness. It doesn't matter if you are here on earth, if you are in the afterlife, if you are in a hellish experience. When you expand your awareness to be able to better perceive reality, to perceive the reality that underneath all of the experiences we create with consciousness is this underlying light and love and presence. The more we can expand our awareness to perceive that underlying truth, the more liberated, the more free, the more expansive we become, and the less we suffer psychologically. A woman named Kim Thompson that I interviewed a few years back had a hellish experience where she saw and came face to face with an extremely scary demonic figure. But through choosing love in her internal state, she saw that figure transform into a beautiful angelic being. So it really is about our perception and our ability to choose our own internal state.
I looked through, it was like I didn't walk towards the gates. But I could see through the gates. It was like a lake. It was like a lake of fire, but it was like a big pit, a big, huge pit of like fire. However, it was like I couldn't see the flames. I just saw the shimmering light, because the shimmering light looked as if like the pit was so deep that you couldn't see the flames. It was just, I had no idea how deep it would be.
An interesting thing, a very, very small percentage of near-death experiencers actually report seeing fire and burning. I don't recall the exact statistics, but it is a very, very small percent. But I have never, ever heard of anybody actually entering into that torment, actually entering into the lake of fire. They're always observers, observing the suffering of others, seeing things around them, but never actually experiencing that level of torment themselves, which to me causes me to question whether any soul actually experiences that. Lake of Fire is a whole other interesting topic. If you do the research on the history of where that phrase came from, it was originally a reference to the supposed destruction of Sodom. All throughout the Old Testament, the word lake of fire is a reference to the supposed destruction of Sodom. I've actually done a few videos going in depth into this topic, and it originally had nothing to do with the afterlife. When the Bible was written, that terminology had nothing to do with the afterlife, but for some reason, modern day Christianity, looking back at things that were written thousands of years ago, now projects our beliefs about an eternal lake of fire into those passages that were actually about the legendary destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now we have millions of people believing that a lake of fire exists in the afterlife. So is it possible that we have created a thought form? Because obviously the afterlife is thought reactive. Some realms in the afterlife are very thought reactive. I mean, this is obvious from any near-death experience that you look at. People think about where they want to go and they end up there instantly. People think about wanting to change their appearance and they change it instantly. People think about wanting to experience a certain point in the Earth's history and they're instantly transported there to live through it as if they were actually there. So the afterlife is very thought reactive. So is it possible that the collective belief in a lake of fire is creating a vibrational state, a realm where people can go, either people who hold this belief or people who are living in a really low vibration or people whose souls have chosen to have that experience for whatever reason, but that it's actually not a real tangible experience. It's just like a hologram. It's more like a state of mind that people are experiencing. Can I be honest? I've spoken with hundreds of people since I first started my YouTube channel. Number one universal thing that people say to me is, why can't I feel divine presence, my guidance, my higher self, etc.? People want to feel something. They want inner transformation on the spiritual path. And yet most religions and spiritual paths fall short to provide this. When I speak to people, even those who are advanced meditators who have more experience meditating than I do, they all tell me the same thing. Nothing really works to give me that connection to divine love that I'm seeking. There are simple practices that you can do that can shift things radically in your internal space. And it takes time and it takes consistency, but it's not hard. And the vast majority of people don't know this and aren't doing this and then wonder why they can't connect to divine love. And this is why I started my one-on-one sessions, so that I can work with people, find out where you're at and exactly what you need. In my sessions, I not only work on your energy field, balancing your chakra system, enhancing your energy, providing energy work for any specific area of need, and giving you feedback on what I see in your energy field, I also send you away with simple, implementable, powerful practices to actually shift your state of consciousness, connect you to your divine nature, your connection to divine love, and be able to shift your consciousness on the internal plane to move away from suffering, attachment, and judgment into peace and flow and connection to divine love. Due to my schedule being a bit packed, I can only take on a limited number of clients in the month of September, and I am looking to work with 2 to 4 people. I do offer single sessions, which are fantastic and I love them, but if you really want to go deep and see shifts, I recommend either the 2 or 4 session packages. It is likely going to fill up very fast. So if you think that you could be in one of those 2 to 4 people that wants to work with me in the month of September, check the description box for the link.
On top of the hopelessness, on top of feeling alone, on top of feeling stuck, my mind all of a sudden started replaying my life. Replaying every sin that I have done. You relive it constantly, and it's so loud. You relive the feelings, your feelings.
This is also very common for anybody who has a hellish experience, that they are replaying the darkest moments of their life over and over and over, like they're stuck in a loop. Angie Fenimore's NDE, which I mentioned earlier, she went to a gray hellish realm where this is exactly what everybody was doing. They were replaying the worst moments of their life over and over and over, and they were stuck in their own thought forms, their own patterns that they had brought with them from Earth. Howard Storm also mentioned this, that the human souls that were torturing and tormenting him in hell were acting out of their basest depravities, I think is what he said, that had been within them on Earth, and now they were stuck in this loop of torment of who they had been on Earth. And what we see over and over and over from people who experience hellish NDEs and then get out is that you have to break that cycle. You have to expand into love and forgiveness. Even if it just means reaching out and calling out for help, usually that's enough. But even more powerful and better if you can find the love and forgiveness within yourself and transform yourself while in that hellish state.
All of a sudden, my body set on fire. My soul set on fire. When my soul set on fire, it was so much hotter because I used to have problems like cutting and burning myself because I hated myself. I know burns and stuff, and there is nothing like your soul being on fire. It hurts so bad. Like it's not, it can't even explain it. You can't even explain it. There is no way to explain the torture. Like I could hear myself screaming in my head. All the thoughts were like if you put some headphones on or whatever in your ears in order to like scream as loud as you can. It's like a billion times louder than that is what your thoughts. You're alone in your thoughts. You're alone in your sins.
So she's being tormented by her thoughts. This is my interpretation. This loop that she's in of being stuck in all of her mistakes and her worst moments from life. It's now screaming in her head, and that's what's causing her torment. And again, I have to be really careful here because this is a real person with a real experience. And my intention here is to offer hope and to offer light and to offer an alternative interpretation of what's happening based on the catalog of millions of NDEs that are out there. There are so many examples of people who experience these things and then are transferred out with a simple shift in self-acceptance, love, or just the thought that there could be help for them.
Every negative thing you've ever felt in your whole life, you will feel in hell.
I do believe that we have the capacity to experience hellish states no matter where we are. It's not about the location. It's about the state of consciousness that we're in. And if we are in a really dark, dense state of just feeling lost and hopeless and beating ourselves up for our mistakes, that state of consciousness is hell. It is what torments us and tortures us. And we can experience that here on earth. We can experience it in the afterlife where it will be more intense because reality itself is at a higher level. It is more intense in the afterlife. So I don't disregard what she's saying here at all, but I think that it is a call for each of us to work on developing our self-awareness and our state of consciousness, developing inner peace, learning how to work with our emotions, expand our consciousness, calm psychological suffering while in the body where the experience is less intense here. I actually think that's one of the reasons for life on earth, to give us the opportunity to grow and expand.
And you will feel it a billion times, and you will feel it forever and ever and ever and ever and ever.
And again, I do think that it can be experienced as forever while we're in it if our state of awareness is locked into that experience. But forever doesn't mean it will continue on and on and on without end, because there is no time on the other side. You can't define forever as something that continues on and on and on without end when you're in a timeless realm. I would say that it is more of an all-encompassing experience because everything is happening in that moment. It's the eternal now. All exists now. So you're experiencing it all now, but that doesn't mean that it will never end in a chronological sense.
As I was screaming, as I was gnashing my teeth, as I was wishing, the fear, the hope, hopelessness, everything, all of a sudden, I was just like, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus.
Let me pause it right here to hazard a guess. As somebody who's listened to so many of these accounts, every single time someone opens up enough to even have the thought to call for help, help is granted. It opens the door in the consciousness enough for the light to come in. I bet you anything she's going to be rescued from hell.
Jesus. as I cried out to Jesus. Immediately, I was ripped from those flames, and all of a sudden, I was in an ambulance, like still felt on fire. And I was screaming in the ambulance. I looked and I saw a paramedic. Didn't really know where I was at or what was going on. I was very confused. But I saw the kindness in her eyes and realized all of a sudden, like, wait a minute, I'm not in hell anymore.
And this is where I'll end the account. You can go finish watching the video if you want to. There's more to it, but that's the end of the hellish experience. This woman has obviously come to the conclusion that the Christian teachings on hell are the truth because of her experience, and is likely now a Christian because of it. I don't know her. I don't know the details of her story, but based on what she said, it sounds like she has become a Christian because of her experience. I do want to point out the fact that there is nothing in her experience that is innately Christian. Jesus didn't show up and tell her, I am the only divine Son of God, and you are in hell because you didn't believe the intellectual facts about my death and resurrection, and now you're going to burn here forever. In fact, quite the opposite. When she calls out for Jesus, she's rescued from hell and she wakes up back in her body, which is very, very typical for NDEs across the board. Each person will interpret the NDE in the way that makes the most sense for them. She's interpreted her experience in light of the Christian faith, and it's her story, her experience, and maybe it was meant to push her to the Christian faith. Good for her. She's found peace and comfort in that faith, and I'm sure that it has been exactly what she has needed to help her grow spiritually, to give her the anchor that she needs. And that's a beautiful thing. But in answer to the people who come to me with the question, what about the hellish Christian NDEs? This NDE doesn't have any specifically Christian theology in it, and it is very consistent with mainstream NDEs across the board. That there are situations where we can have hellish experiences in the afterlife, and while they may feel eternal, it is very possible to be transferred out of them at the first hint of crying for help or of a shift in opening in consciousness. I will also say I believe there are multiple reasons why people can have a hellish experience. It may or may not be because of the way someone's lived their life or their state of mind. In fact, I think the research that has been done on hellish NDEs actually says that the way a person lives their life has nothing to do with it. I think there's many factors, some of which we probably don't even know. I have noticed a correlation between people, like I said, being in a really dense state and the use of drugs. I personally think that maybe using drugs can create hellish states of consciousness when people leave the body. I also believe that sometimes the soul chooses to undergo hellish experiences for its own reason, similar to maybe why our souls choose to have hard lives, because the more pressure we put our consciousness under, the greater potential for expansion. So think about this. If your soul undergoes a hellish experience and in that experience finds the light, finds the love, is able to open up and call for help, that's a huge opportunity for expansion and liberation for you, so that the next time you're in a hellish experience, you may not even go to the same depths of suffering, because you're going to remember, all I have to do is love. All I have to do is ask for help. This is how evolution of consciousness happens. It happens when little by little by little, we find the strength within ourselves to turn to love, to turn to joy, to turn to hope, even in the densest experiences, causing that density to lose its power, releasing the grip of psychological suffering on our minds. This is how people become enlightened. At least it's one road. And choosing to have a hellish experience could be kind of a fast track towards enlightenment for some souls. So I just add those thoughts in to get away from the stigma that just because someone has a hellish experience, it's because they're in a low state of consciousness or it's because of how they live their life. Some people definitely come back with that message, like Howard Storm, and like this beautiful woman who just shared her story seemed to be saying that because she wasn't a Christian and she was doing all these drugs and living the lifestyle the way that she was, she believes that's why she had the hellish experience. But I think we need to be careful not to fall into that stigma. All right, guys, put your links in the comments to other Hellish NDE stories or any other NDE account or any other video on any spiritual topic that you would like me to react to, because I think this is fun. It switches up the content on this channel a little bit and allows us to explore some topics that I may not be able to explore through interviews, just because some of these people might not be comfortable sharing on my channel, knowing that I'm not a Christian channel. Be loved, be happy, be at peace. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support the channel, we have a few fun ways that you can do that. I do have a merch store linked in the description. We've put some of the phrases on t-shirts that you guys requested. I have affiliate links to my favorite blue blockers, my favorite red light panel, and a couple of other companies that I work with. You can join my membership at the Sanctuary. You can sign up for an energy healing. I also offer a 4-session energy healing package. You'll find all these links in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your support. Now go live your most extravagantly loving life.